My guess is, based on his past experience, it's just going to be another hot, steamy pile of dough. I think he's an incompetent sycophant and not the right person to lead DNI.
Unleash Thom Tillis is everyone's favorite Thom Tillis. Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in the East. First, there was Elon Musk, and now, according to one U.S. senator you heard there's Bill Pulte, the man who is now the nation's acting director of national intelligence, who has zero intelligence experience under his belt, is currently cutting jobs at the agency he has led for not even 3 full days. That is according to a senior White House official, following through on a directive given to him from Donald Trump. Top Democrats on the Senate and House Intelligence Committees wrote a letter to Pulte stressing this, quote, given your lack of experience within the intelligence community, it is difficult to imagine that in such a short amount of time, you've already developed fully informed views as to how to shrink ODNI without incurring risks to national security. Meanwhile, an explosive new piece of reporting in the Washington Post to tell you about, raising even more questions about risk to national security in this office specifically. These are about Pulte's predecessor, Tulsi Gabbard. Washington Post reporter John Swain details his lengthy investigation into Tulsi Gabbard's relationship with a religious leader whom she once described as her guru. The man is named Chris Butler. He led an organization called The Science of Identity. It's a Hare Krishna group. Swain reports this, quote, some former members, however, have called the group a cult and said disciples were isolated from the outside world, characterizations the group denies. Former devotees had been telling me for weeks that Butler controlled his followers' major life decisions and demanded total obedience and secrecy. They said that he spent years working to extend his reach into politics, and they suspected Tulsi Gabbard's rise in Washington was the culmination of that effort. Swain's investigation uncovered hundreds of confidential memos that appear to include direction and guidance for Tulsi Gabbard. Quote, some contained instructions on what legislation she should propose, which policies she should embrace, and how she should conduct herself on television. They had an air of authority. MS Now has not independently confirmed the reporting, but it's striking to read Swain's findings and then to watch what's publicly available in terms of how Tulsi Gabbard spoke on television. Quote, an October 12, 2015 memo labeled CNN Wolf Blitzer Talking Points Final contained this language about reports that she had been asked by Democratic leadership not to attend a presidential debate. Quote, it's not a boo-hoo, I don't get to go to the party situation, Wolf. And here's what she said to Wolf on CNN that same day.
The issue here is not about me saying, boo-hoo, I'm going to miss the party.
Looks like she took those notes to heart. Swain's reporting is a deeply alarming look into potential ties, connections, and motivations of a former member of Congress, and until last week, the one person in our country who was put atop 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. The journalist spoke with a former member of this religious group who also worked for Tulsi Gabbard's congressional campaigns. Her name is Rebecca Salzberg, and adds this reporting, quote, the documents, together with Salzberg's explanation of them, raised remarkable questions. Had a reclusive guru been secretly trying to steer Tulsi Gabbard's actions as a public official? And could that shed light on the improbable arc traced by one of the most unconventional shapeshifters in modern American politics? Questions about U.S. national security as we learn more about the former DNI is where we begin this hour with Washington Post investigative reporter John Swain. Also joining us, former director of the CIA, our senior national security and intelligence analyst, John Brennan, who I'm sure never thought he'd be here fielding questions about the intersection of Hare Krishna gurus and intelligence. But here we are, Director Brennan. John Swain, take me through your reporting.
As you mentioned, this is based on documents provided to me by a former member of Tulsi Gabbard's faith group, Rebecca Salzberg. She worked both for Tulsi Gabbard and for Chris Butler, the guru. She passed to me hundreds of memos which document transcripts of calls between Tulsi Gabbard and an unnamed advisor. This person is always unidentified in these documents, but occasionally he's referred to as he or S sometimes, which we know to be a nickname for Butler within the organization. And as you mentioned, they contain remarkably direct guidance and directives for what Gabbard should say, what legislation she should propose in the House, talking points for TV appearances that she had. And I went through and compared these memos to what she really did do. And on several occasions, the match is remarkable. There are times when he says, do this the next day, do this tomorrow, and she releases a statement. The following week, she proposes a bill. There is also much harsh criticism of Tulsi Gabbard's performance in these memos, often in expletive terms and telling her that she needs to improve her performance. And as you mentioned, there's this air of authority. There's this sense within these documents that the voice behind them has control of what this person does and says.
What is a guru, and what is this religious group?
Chris Butler, in the late 1960s, when the Hare Krishna movement first was founded, he joined it in Hawaii. He was a college dropout, and he was a sort of charismatic, lean, good speaker. And he built a kind of band of devotees, followers. And over the years, that merged together, morphed into what's called the Science of Identity Foundation. And for decades now, he's run this organization in Hawaii. Tulsi Gabbard's parents were among his devotees in the early 80s when they moved to Hawaii with her as a young child and her siblings. She was raised in it. They all have spiritual alternative names that they use within the organization. And, publicly, the Science of Identity Foundation and Butler present themselves as being concerned with yoga and with chanting and with matters of spirituality and diet and those sort of things. However, former members tell me and have told other reporters that behind the scenes, there's a different element. There is control. There is dictation of who should marry who and when. There are orders that people have to follow and to work for Butler for free. And as you said in the introduction, several former members have described it as a cult, which the group obviously disputes.
Did any of your reporting suggest that information flowed in both directions? I mean, is there any need for any sort of examination of whether or not any secrets went the other direction from Tulsi Gabbard to her guru?
My reporting didn't find that. That was obviously a priority to look for whether any kind of classified information or secrets were being transferred the other way. I didn't find that in the documents that we have. There are discussions that she has with this unnamed advisor mentioning non-classified matters in congressional committees. However, that kind of material, when I found it, tended to be stuff that was in the news as well. It's important to stress, however, that I don't have a view of all their communications at the time. I have a view of the communications that were shared with my source. And she is upfront in saying she didn't get everything. She was on Butler's, what she says was called its political team. And she was shown some documents and not all. So we don't really know the full extent of the relationship.
What is your analysis of her motives for going public with the relationship between Butler and Gabbard?
We quote her in my piece as saying her reasons are twofold, really. She became very disenchanted with the group and angry and fell out, in fact, with the leadership over completely separate allegations of mishandling, of allegations of abuse. She got into a kind of war of words with the leadership and left them. But she said she's also angry in retrospect at the public being misled about Tulsi Gabbard's relationship with Chris Butler. Tulsi Gabbard publicly denied that Chris Butler ever politically mentored her. She said that it was, the kind of regular relationship that a member of Congress might have with a rabbi or an imam or a priest, and that it was matters of spirituality and faith. However, Rebecca Salzberg says, and these documents appear to back up, it went far beyond that, far beyond the normal relationship, and this was extensive political direction. And so Rebecca Salzberg was involved in this, and she regrets that, she says. She says at the time she thought she was serving a higher purpose of environmental politics, of anti-war activism. Tulsi Gabbard was known for that. But she says it was wrong and that people deserve to know.